So now you've got some technical data under you. At first, when that first came out, when he first wrote that book, everybody said, that man crazy. So that nigga got to be out of his mind. But after DNA came out, and they proved that he was right, today that Dakar University that he was working in the carbon laboratory lab of is called Sheikh Anta Diop University. Hopefully, when you're watching this, you can go online and you can pull up the rest of it. It's about an hour long. And it's called Sheikh Anta Diop, The Origin of Humanity. You might do better pulling it up by saying The Origin of Humanity by Sheikh Anta Diop. Now we're going to go on a little later, a little further on. So now I'm going to introduce you to John Henry Clarke. And John Henry Clarke is being introduced by the movie star Wesley Snipes. And he's going to explain to you how he came to learn the knowledge of our past. Because before this, everybody thought that our history started at slavery. But you will find as we continue that long before slavery, we as a people created all of civilization, starting with civilization itself. Now, I introduce you to John Henry Clarke.
History is a clock that people use to tell their political and cultural time of day. It is also a compass that people use to find themselves on the map of human geography. History tells of people where they have been and what they have been, where they are and what they are. Most important, history tells a people where they still must go and what they still must be. The relationship of history to the people is the same as the relationship of a mother to her child.
How do you describe a legend, an African-American hero, an historian, an activist, who for half a century has charted a singular course dedicated to the intellectual and spiritual liberation of a people? Though his eyes are now darkened by glaucoma, he continues to enlighten the lives of thousands of men and women through the pages of his many books and in university classrooms across the country. How do you describe a legend? You can't, really. But you can meet the men and women who influenced him. You can learn from him the hidden history of the African people. Learn from him a different way of making sense of this complex and often very confusing world. And you can let Dr. John Henry Clarke tell his own extraordinary story in his own soulful style.
Springs, Alabama, New Year's Day, 1915. That was a great feast day in our family. And because my mother was a favorite in the family and I was late arriving, she said that nothing would be killed in this family until my child is born. And I didn't arrive until 3, and everybody was hungry. The feast had not started, and I wasn't exactly welcome. They never quite forgave me for that, holding up the feast. My early schooling was in one-room schoolhouse that we called Miller's Hill School. When we moved slightly out of the city, I was chosen to go to city school. Officially, I never finished high school in the formal sense until later years. In fact, I taught 2 generations before I took time out to get my BA, my master's, and my PhD. And I have it all now, but I'm principally self-trained. My university was the public library and well-chosen second-hand bookstores. So while I grew up poor, I grew up in a very rich environment, culturally rich. I grew up with a whole lot of love and affection, a lot of lap time and a lot of slap time too, because I wasn't permitted to get away with too much. Miss Evelina Taylor is my 5th grade teacher, and she might be the foundation teacher in my life. In addition to teaching me basic good thinking and good conduct, she called me into her room during her lunch hour one day and told me to stop playing the fool because I was playing the fool just to get accepted. And she said, it is better to be right and march into hell than to follow a bunch of fools into heaven. I wanted to do something to impress Miss Taylor, and we had current events on Friday. We wanted to say something unusual because I worked for white people before and after school, and they had magazines. They would receive them one day, read them hurriedly up, throw them away the next day. So when I got up for current events, I always had something decidedly different to say about my own people and about other people. Now I wanted to do something real big. So I went to a lawyer that I worked for before and after school. I can still remember his name, Gag Steiner, and I asked him for a book about my people in early world history. He says, I'm sorry, John, that you came from a people who have no history. My mind would not accept that. I continued to search, and I opened a book called The New Negro, and I opened to an essay called The Negro Digs Up His Past. And for the first time, I knew that I came from a very old people, that we were older than slavery, older than oppression, older than Europe. Now the scramble began for more information.
During the disaster years of the Great Depression, Americans in huge numbers take to the rails. They don't take Pullman cars or day coaches. They stow away on the freights, riding the rails in search of the opportunity to create a better life. John Henry Clark wrote them. Out of the South first, briefly to Chicago, and then on to New York City.
I had a dream. I thought that because I'd had some success and writing local plays and writing lyrics for songs for local plays, and that I could go write professionally. It was a dream, it was a fantasy. I was pursuing this fantasy. At 18, you can pursue all kinds of fantasies.
In the shadow of Manhattan's towering skyscrapers lies black, sprawling Harlem, greatest Negro metropolis in the world.
My impressions of the Harlem community, in the first place, it was a clean community. It was an orderly community. It was a safe community. It was a community with its customs that we have forgotten now. Street speaking customs, strolling customs, social customs. There was a time when 7th Avenue, now Adam Powell Boulevard, was the street of choice. And you did not walk down 7th Avenue on Saturday or Sunday without a coat and a tie. There was a custom of getting your lady in your long good suit and walking down 7th Avenue to show her off. You would walk 15 blocks. Sometime when you had $1 or so to spend, you would take on the 5th Avenue open bus all the way down to New York University and all the way back. And she was satisfied, and the whole evening you hadn't spent $1. A lot of times didn't have one. They sure don't make ladies like that anymore. There was a time there were 3 functioning vaudeville theaters in Harlem, all well patronized. The Lafayette, Harlem Opera House, and the Apollo. The old Lincoln Theater, now a church, used to be a legitimate theater, while the plays downtown would be brought uptown with the played with a black cast. Tyrant, show thy face! And that was our Broadway. I got involved with the communists and the socialists and other radicals, and began to read literature on the Russia of that day and see movies about Russia. I was never a member of the Communist or the Socialist Party. I was active briefly in the Young Communist League. We were looking for a way out of the condition in which we lived. And they opened doors for us, gave us a platform we otherwise did not have. Paul Robeson was the one artist who made the great sacrifice based on commitment. Communist or the Socialist Party. I was active briefly in the Young Communist League. We were looking for a way out of the condition in which we lived. And they opened doors for us, gave us a platform we otherwise did not have. Paul Robeson was the one artist who made the great sacrifice based on commitment. And that commitment is that an artist is supposed to use his or her art to change the society in which they live. W.E.B. Du Bois is our greatest single intellect we produced in the whole of the Western world. And he's not just a black American intellect. He is an American intellect equal to any. W.E.B. Du Bois, Paul Robeson, the party came closest to what those men wanted to stand for in the world was a fair deal for the working people of the world. We would examine it later to our sorrow. We were in an argument between not a liberator and an oppressor, but two oppressors with different techniques and methodology of oppression. In the final analysis, Russia did not want us to be free any more than the United States and England and the imperial powers, but they wanted us under their domination. I never thought the left movement, communists or socialists, made any serious study of the history and the background of the African people of the world. And they had a preconceived notion of us that had nothing to do with our reality. And these African communal societies, who each got according to his needs, were not copied from Europe because they existed before there was a Europe. In these societies, based on the concept of the family and the community, everyone in the society had a responsibility. And in these societies, there was no word for jail because no one had ever gone to one. No word for orphanage because no one had ever thrown away any children. No word for old people's home because no one had ever thrown away grandma and grandpa. And while I had some admiration for the conclusion of Karl Marx, I dare to say he was a political opportunist and a Johnny-come-lately because he was rehashing something that was in the world before the first European wore a shoe or lived in a house that had a window. During my early years in Harlem in the 30s, my writing consisted mainly of poetry, short stories, and little essays on aspects of history. The Harlem Renaissance writers, of course, influenced me. I knew Claude McKay. I knew Langston Hughes. I knew Richard Wright before he had published Native Son. I knew Wallace Thurman, Nellie Lawson, Jesse Fawcett. I found a Pan-Africanist consciousness in a Langston Hughes and to some degree in a Claude McKay. But the rest of them were rather parochial. Finally, I got to meet Arthur Schomburg.
Arthur Schomburg, mentor to two generations of African American scholars. The legacy of this Puerto Rican-born historian is the world's definitive institution of its kind, Harlem's Schomburg Center for Research in Black Culture.
I went down to 135th Street Library. He was on the third floor. And I asked, very humbly, asked the librarian, do you know anybody who would give me a letter to see Arthur Schomburg? And she said very sharply, and impatiently, because she was short of help, you just have to walk up 3 flights. I walked up 3 flights, and there Arthur Schomburg was holding down the desk, being 18 and rash. I wanted to know the history of the African people of the world. Henceforth, right now, within the hour, his lunch hour, all of it. He said, sit down, son. What you're calling African history and Negro history are the missing pages of world history. Then he said, son, go study the history of your masters. Go study the history of the people who enslaved you and find out why they found it a necessity to remove an entire people from the respectful commentary of the history of the world. Well, my earliest impressions of them was a people in power who intended to stay in power. And I began to wonder why they had so much and other people had so little, and why everybody I knew worked harder than they. Who made this arrangement? I studied European history and world history. Now, when I went back to Schomburg with some knowledge of background of European history, now he began to show me how to study African history. Arthur Schomburg taught me the interrelationship of African history to world history. Willison Huggins of the Old Harlem History Club taught me the political meaning of history. And from the lectures of William Leo Hansberry of Howard University, I learned the philosophical meaning of history. The most valuable lesson I would learn is that when you address a people by their right name, that name must relate to land, history, and culture. All people go back to the geography of their original origin and identify themselves, no matter where they live on the face of the earth. We have overused the word black because black tells you how you look, but it don't tell you who you are. You can call an Italian white, but that don't tell you anything about him. We are the only people who seem to have lost that all essential trait of geographical and historical reference.